Hi everyone and welcome to our D3 labs, and today we're gonna start to draw using D3. So we want to create more shape related to the data. So the first thing is that you will notice that HTML is not meant to draw. So you cannot create like lines in a curved way or circles easily. You can, but it's not always easy to create like ellipses and all this kind of stuff with HTML because it's not meant for that. So we use SVG for that. So SVG is a way that you can draw in a vector using code, and you can draw anything actually, even if you want to draw any kind of drawing, even like characters or logotypes, you can do that using SVG. We are more interested in drawing data. So one thing that is important to note in SVG is that different from HTML, you don't have a layout component that arranges things for you. So you have to position everything yourself. So, and the SVG element has a coordinate system that starts in the 0, 0 on the top left and grows until the width and the height of your SVG element being the bottom right of your screen. So SVG has some elements that you can use to draw, and we have, for example, circle that enables you to draw a circle, and you can define the radius of the circle, you can define the X position of the circle and the Y position. This X and Y is relative to the center of the circle. We can also draw a rectangle using SVG elements. So rectangles, you can define the X and Y position of the top left of the rectangle, and you can define the width and the height of the rectangle. The rectangles are very useful to draw bar charts, for example. Straight lines you can draw using the tag line, and we have x1 and y1 as the start position and x2 and y2 as the end position of the line. These are very useful if you are drawing, for example, a node link diagram and you need lines to connect the dots. The path is the most powerful one, so you can draw basically anything using path. And the thing is, it has one language specification that you can use to draw, to create your path. So, but you don't have to learn this language because D3 have some cool features that help us to compile the data to this language, and we don't have to learn how this language works properly. We just can rely on D3 to do this conversion for us. But you can draw any shape using path, and it's very useful if you're drawing a line chart, for example. Then we have the text. So if you want to add a text to the SVG, then you can use the tag text, and you can define the X and Y position of the text, and the inner text, the text inside the tag, will be the one that will be visualized. So another thing is, we have in SVG one element that is really important, that is the group one. So it's called G, and it enables you to group many elements and move them together and rotate them together if you want. So it's really useful to organize your data, you organize your drawing. So the G will never hinder anything on the screen, so you cannot set styles and things like that for the G. The only function is to group elements, so you can transform all of them together, you can move them together. Okay, so let's see how SVG works. So the first thing, we have a simple page here, and to be able to draw, I need to create a SVG element. Everything has to be inside this element, and I cannot draw outside it. And if I draw anything that goes beyond the coordinates, it will not show in the screen. So I will define a width for this SVG and also a height. Okay, so we cannot see it, but it's here when I select. and you see there is this blue box here. Let's make it a little bigger so I can see everything. Okay. Now if I want to draw inside, I just have to create elements inside this SVG. So for example, I want a border so I can see it, because right now I am only seeing because I am using brackets, and when I select, brackets highlight the element. So let's create a border on it. And because SVG itself is not a render element, I cannot draw the border, so I have to create a rect for that. So I will create a rect with the width equal the same of the SVG and the height being the same as well. So now I have a rect that fills the SVG, but I don't want the background to be black. I want to change the color. So one thing that is different from HTML is that in HTML you use background color to change the color, but in SVG you will use fill. And here I can define white if I want the fill white, but I can also define none, so it's actually transparent. So I don't have any color here. But I want to have a border, and border here is defined by stroke. So the stroke tells the size of the stroke. Oh, sorry. Stroke tells the color of the stroke, and stroke width tells the thickness of the stroke. It is black. Okay, so now I have a border around my SVG, and I could play with the color, I could play with the thickness, making it even thicker or more subtle. And so I have a border. So let's suppose that I want to give a title to my chart, to my visualization. So I can use text to add text component to my SVG. And if you look, I have the text, but it's like outside my screen. So I can move the text, and you can move the text using DX and DY. So let's move DY 30, and let's move DX 10. So I can use style in SVG as well, inline or outside. So I can use font size called 20. Let's do 30. So I have a big title. Okay, now one thing that I want is I want to centralize this title here, right? So one thing that I can do that is really easy is just get the width and divide by 2 and put it here, so 300. The problem is that what is centralized is the start of the text and not the middle of the text. So text has one thing that is called text anchor. And this allows me to change the anchor of the text to middle. So now I have the middle of the text in my X position. I could do end and move my text, the end of my text, to that specific position. I want to keep the middle. Great. So another thing that I want to show is I want right now a triangle here and one here. So let's draw this one first. And for that I can use path, because path allow me to draw anything I want. So again, I will use the language of the path here, but you don't have to worry too much, because remember that D3 have some helpers that help you to create this language, to produce that. But basically you have to start with one position. I will start with the position 0, 0. And you can draw a line to somewhere else. So I want to draw a line to the position 25, 25. So we cannot see the path because I need to do stroke black. So now you can see the path. and I will remove the fill for now. So I have a line to 25, 25. Now I want to bring the line here that will be 0 in the X and probably 50 on the Y. So I want a new line from 0 to 50. So now I have a line here, and now I want to close my triangle on the top. So now I will create a new line to 0, 0. And then I have a triangle. And now I can, if I want, I can change the fill. I want my triangle to be gray, and I don't want it to have border. So I have a gray triangle. So one thing that I want to do is draw the other one here. But the problem is, it's much easier to draw in 0, 0 position than trying to draw here and computing the width. So what you can do, you can duplicate your path, and you can use transform equal translate. This allows me to move the triangle without having to mess with that. So everything here will be relative to this position. So I can do, for example, I want to translate in the x-axis 50 and nothing in the y-axis. So now I have a second triangle with the same language, but more to the right. But I have to invert this triangle because it's pointing to the wrong direction. So the first one should start in 2050x. Then the second one should be 0.25. Then the third one should be 2550. Then the last one 2050. So I just draw an inverted triangle, and I can keep moving. So because my triangle has 25 pixels, if I want to move to the last position, I can just do 600 less 25. That will be 575. Now it is in the end. And now to conclude, I want a line that will separate my title from my visualization. And I can do just x1 equal to this position here, that is 0. And I will end in the x1 equal the width, that is 600. And then I want my y1 to be 60 and my y2 to be 60 as well. And of course I need stroke, so I will make it gray. I miss here. Okay, now I have my stroke and it's separated. So one thing that I want now is that I want to move all this stuff down. So I can group then. So I have the text, the path, and the line, and I can group all of them inside a G element. So now that I have a G, I can move everything together like. See, I can translate to the left, I can translate down. But I want to translate only in the Y position. I would just want to move them down. Great. And I want to move this path just 1 pixel less, so I can see the border here. Let's move it more. Let's put 65. So I have 10 pixels difference, and I will also transform this one to move this path a little bit to the left, and I will make it 10. Okay, so I have my title. So basically you can keep adding SVG, but our goal is to use the tree to add this dynamically based on data. So now let's try to add some data. So let's use as previous JSON load. I want to load my data. It's the same data from last week. The difference that now I have an additional field. So I have foods and I have how delicious they are. And I also have the sugar in the food. And then we have error and result. But the idea is exactly the same. And then I have here a variable that I call data. That will be equal nothing here. And here it will be equal to result. That is my result. And when I have my result working, I want to call a function that I will define that is called render. So I can render my data. But before I do that, I can start to create some things. So the first thing, I can create my variable that point to the place where I am gonna draw based on the data. So I will create a group here and I will call it dot group. So I can create my data inside this group, my dots. So I can move them all together. D3 select and basing ID dot group. So now I have a pointer that point to this group here, so I can work with it. Second thing I want to define is, because everything here is positioned specifically in the X and Y position, it's good to have the width and the height of the SVG in one variable. So I can do width 600, the height 400. Another thing that is also good to have is the margins. So you can do margin and you can do top. I want to have 90, left I want to have 20, right I want also 20, and the last one that is bottom I want to have 20. So you see that I can create an object and then with the properties here. So this is my margin object with specification of the margin. So the last thing that I want the inner width. And I can do that, define this by being width minus the margin left and minus the margin right. So this is basically the space that I have to draw my data. And then I can do inner height, that will be, well, my height minus margin top, margin bottom. And here should be a comma. Okay, so now I have all the definitions for my visualization that make much easier to keep track of where I'm gonna position my elements. So the first thing that I also want to do now is I have the data, so I can start to write my render function. And my render function is assuming that the data will come here. So I want to draw here a dot for each element of my data set. So I can do, I have already here my visualization, so I can do this dot select all. Remember that here we are selecting the future, the current, so we are selecting the existing element, but also after we bind the data, this will also be the future elements, the ones that are in the data, but there are no correspondent on the screen. So I want to select, because I'm gonna create circles, I will select circles. And then I want to bind some data, that is basically my data. And I will assign. Okay, so now I have my data points and I want to work only in the new ones. So enter, because I want to work only in the new. And for those, I want to append a new circle. Okay, if I do that, I can't see any circle because a circle needs a radius to be seen. So let's define a radius for the circle. Let's check if it's okay. So now I have the circles here, one on top of other because all of them have the same 0, 0 position. So I want to start to move those circles. And I can do that by setting the X and Y position. So let's try to set the X for now, just based in the index of this element in my array. So let's do I, and because we have a radius of 10, let's do I times 20. So I have the evenly spaced. Oh, sorry, a circle has to be CX and not just X. So now I have all the circles here, but they are all on the top. I want to move them here. That is the position where I want to have my data. So what you can do vis dot transform. So the same thing that I did here with the path and here with the group, I want to do with this group as well. And then I can translate it based on my variables. So I have margin left here and margin top here. So I can have a margin separated then. Now I move them to the position that I want, margin top and the margin left. Okay, good. So let's see if we can change the Y position of the circles as well. Okay, so now we have also the Y position of the circle. And just now they are just based on the I, the index of the element in the data. And let's try to make this look more like a scatter plot. So we can, instead of returning based on the index, I will return for now a random value. So I can use math.random to generate a number that is random between 0 and 0.99. Oh, exactly, 0 and 0.99. It's a pseudo random, but works for our purpose. And I can then multiply this by the inner width. So I will be basically generating a random number between 0 here and the inner width that is here. So I can put my circle in any position here. Great. So now let's do the same thing with the Y part. So I can copy exactly the same thing. But I will replace inner width by inner height. Oh, I have two parentheses here. Okay, now I have everything in random. Great. So now we can format the circles. So let's suppose that I want to set the color of the circle. So you can do that again in two ways. You can just create a CSS on the top, or you can set here using the tree. So I want to set the fill to be red. And another thing that you can do is also set the opacity of the dot, because that doesn't happen here, but sometimes you have overlap between the dots. So if you set it to be a little bit transparent, then you can see the background and see what you have behind them. Okay, so now it's your turn. So using this idea of adding circles to SVG, I want you to add a circle for each country on your previous page. and add the SVG and add the circles. And for now, you can just using the same thing that I did on the demo. You can use match random to generate random positions for your circles. And if you want to move, so the SVG should be able to be on the right of your list, you can use float left. So this in the list, so this will make the SVG shows here and not on the bottom of your list.